Ethan and Sarah had been married for 10 years. In the beginning, their love was effortless. Every morning, he would kiss her on the forehead before leaving for work, and every evening, they would talk for hours about everything and nothing at all. Their laughter would fill the small apartment they first shared, and even in silence, there was a comfort, a warmth that made them feel invincible. But as the years passed, something changed. The love was still there, but it no longer sparkled the way it once did. Life had become routine. Ethan's work hours stretched longer, and when he came home, exhaustion clung to him like a heavy coat. Sarah still greeted him with a smile, still asked about his day, but his responses became shorter, less engaged. At first, she told herself it was just a phase, that work was stressful, and that things would go back to the way they were. Months passed, then years, and the distance between them grew. She missed the man who used to bring home her favorite chocolate just because. She missed the way he used to look at her like she was the most important thing in his world. Now, he barely looked at her at all. He was always busy, always tired, always somewhere else even when he was sitting right beside her. Sarah tried to be understanding. She reminded herself that love was not always grand gestures and endless passion, that sometimes love was quiet, steady, and unspoken. But there were nights when she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger in her own marriage. It was a loneliness she never thought she would know while sharing a home with the man she loved. One evening, as they lay in bed, she turned to him and whispered, "Ethan, will you take a walk with me?" Her voice was soft, hesitant, filled with the kind of hope that had been dwindling for years. She did not want anything extravagant. She just wanted to hold his hand, to walk under the stars the way they used to when they were younger. She wanted to feel close to him again, even if only for a little while. Ethan let out a sigh, rubbing his temples. "Sarah, it's past midnight. I have work early tomorrow." His words were not harsh, but they stung. She swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. "I understand." She turned off the lamp and lay beside him in silence, but inside, her heart ached. He had not even asked why she wanted to go for a walk. He had not noticed the longing in her voice, the way she had been reaching for him in small, quiet ways. He had not noticed her at all. The clock on the bedside table glowed with the soft light of early morning hours. It was past midnight, and the house was quiet except for the occasional sigh of the wind against the windows. Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him. The conversation from earlier still lingered in his mind, Sarah's voice, so soft, almost fragile, asking him to take a walk. He had brushed it off, too tired to entertain the idea. He turned onto his side, expecting to see her sleeping beside him. But the bed was empty. The blanket on her side was pulled back, and the spot where she had been lying was cool to the touch. A faint sense of unease crept into his chest. He pushed himself up, rubbing his eyes before glancing toward the door. It was slightly ajar. A quiet creak from downstairs made his pulse quicken. He swung his legs over the bed and stood, his bare feet meeting the cold floor as he made his way through the darkened hallway. As he reached the top of the staircase, he saw the front door slowly swinging closed, as if someone had just stepped outside. His heart pounded. Without thinking, he grabbed his jacket from the hook near the door and stepped out onto the porch. The air was crisp, and the moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the quiet neighborhood. His eyes searched the yard, and that's when he saw her. Sarah was walking barefoot across the damp grass, her white nightgown flowing behind her. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost dreamlike. The way she walked sent a chill through him, her steps were too smooth, too controlled, as if she were gliding rather than walking. "Sarah," he called out, his voice uncertain. She did not respond. She didn't even turn her head. A strange, heavy feeling settled in his stomach. He quickened his pace, moving toward her. "Sarah, where are you going?" Still, she gave no answer. The wind whispered through the trees, rustling the leaves, but everything else was eerily silent. No distant cars, no crickets, no sounds of the night, just the soft padding of Sarah's feet against the grass. A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine as he reached out and grabbed her shoulder. But the moment his fingers touched her, she vanished. Not like a person pulling away, not like anything human. She simply dissolved into the night, disappearing before his very eyes. Ethan stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he had just seen. He turned in every direction, searching for her, but the yard was empty. Only the wind moved through the trees. His heart thundered in his chest. Had he imagined it? Had he been dreaming? His pulse pounded in his ears as he spun on his heel and ran back into the house. His mind screamed that it was impossible, that what he had seen defied everything he understood about reality. He burst through the doorway, taking the stairs two at a time, his breath ragged as he reached their bedroom. And there, lying peacefully beneath the covers, was Sarah. She was right where he had left her, her breathing deep and even, as if she had been asleep all along. Ethan's hands trembled as he stepped closer, staring at her peaceful expression. He could still feel the ghost of her presence outside, the weight of her shoulder beneath his fingertips before she had vanished. His knees felt weak. He sat down on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair. Was he losing his mind? He lay down beside her, staring at the ceiling, but sleep never came. The moment kept replaying in his mind, over and over, like a haunting whisper at the back of his thoughts. Something was wrong. Something was terribly, inexplicably wrong. The morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the bedroom. Birds chirped outside, the world waking up as if nothing had happened. But Ethan lay still, his body tense, his mind replaying the events of the night. Had it been real? Had he truly seen Sarah outside, walking barefoot in the grass, only for her to vanish the moment he touched her? Or had it been some strange, vivid dream? He turned his head to look at her. She lay beside him, breathing softly, her face peaceful, unaware of the turmoil in his mind. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, he reached out and gently touched her arm. Warm. Solid. Real. Sarah stirred, stretching slightly before her eyes fluttered open. She turned to him with a soft smile. Good morning. Ethan swallowed, trying to steady his voice. Morning. She propped herself up on one elbow, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You look like you barely slept. Bad dreams? He hesitated. Should he tell her? Yeah, he finally said, his voice quieter than usual. Something like that. Sarah tilted her head slightly. You want to talk about it? Ethan studied her for a moment, searching for any sign that she might know anything in her expression that hinted at what had happened last night. But she looked at him the same way she always did, her eyes full of quiet warmth. He forced a small smile. No, it's nothing. Just a weird dream. She nodded, slipping out of bed. I'll make some coffee. You need it. As she walked toward the door, Ethan sat up. His eyes followed her, his mind racing. Did she really not know? Had she truly been in bed all night? Or was she pretending? He watched her disappear into the hallway, his heart still heavy with the weight of uncertainty. And for the first time in their marriage, he wasn't sure if he truly knew the woman he had spent 10 years beside. Ethan sat at the edge of the bed, rubbing his hands together as he tried to make sense of everything. The logical part of his mind told him it had to be a dream, an exhaustion-induced hallucination. But another part of him, the part still chilled from the night before, refused to accept such a simple explanation. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the coffee machine humming from the kitchen. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the house, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. But normal didn't explain what he had seen. Taking a deep breath, he stood and walked toward the kitchen. As he stepped inside, Sarah was standing by the counter, pouring 2 cups of coffee. She turned and smiled, sliding one across the counter toward him. Still look tired, she said, studying him. You sure you're okay? Ethan hesitated before nodding. Yeah. Just thinking. Sarah leaned against the counter, blowing gently on her coffee before taking a sip. Thinking about what? He took a deep breath, tapping his fingers against the mug. He wanted to ask her, needed to know. But how did he even begin? Finally, he spoke. You didn't get up last night, did you? She raised an eyebrow. No. Why? Ethan studied her carefully. Her expression didn't change, no flicker of hesitation, no sign of discomfort. Just casual curiosity. I thought I heard something, he said slowly. Thought I saw you outside. Sarah frowned. Outside? Ethan, I was in bed all night. A chill ran through him. He forced a small chuckle. Must have been a dream, then. Sarah smiled, taking another sip of coffee. Must have been. You really need to get some rest. Ethan nodded but said nothing. His mind screamed at him. If it was just a dream, why did it feel so real? And if it wasn't, then who, or what, had he followed into the night? The day passed in a blur. Ethan tried to shake off the eerie feeling that had settled deep in his chest, but it clung to him like a shadow. He went through the motions, showering, getting dressed, even sitting at his desk and pretending to work, but his mind kept circling back to the night before. Had it truly been a dream? Or had something else happened, something he couldn't explain? By the time the evening rolled around, he had made a decision. Tonight, he wouldn't sleep. Tonight, he would watch. Sarah had spent the evening reading on the couch, curled up with a blanket. She looked peaceful, completely unaware of the silent battle raging inside him. When it was time for bed, she kissed his cheek and slipped under the covers, sighing softly as she nestled into the pillows. Ethan lay beside her, eyes open, listening. The house was quiet. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Minutes passed. Then hours. And then, just past midnight, Sarah stirred. Ethan held his breath as she sat up slowly, her movements smooth, almost unnatural. She turned her head slightly, but her eyes never opened. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood. His pulse pounded as she began walking, slow, deliberate steps toward the door. Sarah, he whispered. She didn't respond. He pushed himself up, his body tense as he followed her. She moved the same way she had the night before, as if guided by something unseen. She stepped outside. Ethan's throat tightened, but he forced himself to follow. The air was cool against his skin as he stepped onto the grass, his bare feet sinking slightly into the damp earth. Sarah kept walking, her nightgown drifting in the wind. Sarah, stop. His voice was louder this time. She didn't. Heart pounding, he reached for her shoulder, gripping it firmly. Sarah gasped, her body jerking violently as if waking from a deep sleep. She turned to him, her eyes wide, filled with confusion and something else. Something darker. Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling. What am I doing out here? His breath came in shallow gasps. I don't know. You were walking. You didn't answer me. Sarah's hands began to shake. I don't remember. I don't remember leaving the bed. Ethan swallowed hard. This isn't the first time. Her eyes snapped to his. What? You did this last night too. I followed you. I tried to stop you, but you disappeared. Sarah's lips parted, her breath hitching. Ethan, I don't understand. Neither did he. They stood there in the dark, staring at each other, the weight of something unknown pressing against them. Then, the wind shifted, carrying a whisper through the trees. You never saw her, Ethan. You never listened. The voice was neither his nor Sarah's. It was something else. Sarah gasped, clutching his arm. Did you hear that? Ethan couldn't speak. His heart slammed against his ribs. The night was silent again. But something was watching. Something had been waiting. And Ethan knew. This wasn't just about Sarah sleepwalking. It was about him. It was about what he had failed to see. The love he had neglected. The woman who had felt invisible for years. And the haunting truth that, if he didn't change, he might lose her for good. Not to another man. Not to time. But to something else, something neither of them could understand. Something that had already come for her.